All right. I think we can get started. I'm sure people will continue to trickle in. Yeah, thanks all for joining. Very much appreciate all of the collaboration that's already been happening across a bunch of different perspectives and viewpoints. A lot of great progress already on just refining the vision for how we can make sure we are taking positive steps to the end game that we all want to get to around improving L2 UX while also not degrading the experience for any users or flows. And thank you to Marco and Jeff for doing a lot of the heavy lifting to get the draft of this ERC together. Um, yeah, we don't have a huge agenda, although is a nice list of open questions for us to get through today. Before we jump into a review of the ERC draft, does anyone have anything they wanted to start off with or just mention here at the jump?
Um, I was gonna propose taking as little time on the call today, but maybe on the next call or something, having a sort of parallel document of considered alternatives or forks in the road, because I'm a little confused with you know, the comments about censorship proof, like completely abandoning the off-chain registry or those kinds of things. Like there's all these
Sure.
uh, forks in the road that I just want to like capture and make sure that if those are going to be a separate EIP someday, they're somehow written down. So I might be on the call trying to write things down, capture things that get tabled.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, there's certainly a few different directions that we can take. I guess is this in reference to maybe was Wilson's recent message in the chat around sort of just focusing on the off-chain registry element or something else?
Yeah. I mean, that's why I got pulled in here, I think.
Yeah, gotcha.
So I'm sort of curious because I noticed in the draft the fallback was status quo, and I thought the goal of either this or some future ERC was totally moving away from it. So I'm sort of trying to keep that separate and not slow down the other stuff with it.
Yep, got it. Okay, great. Yeah, if you don't mind, I'm happy to collaborate with you on that document. That sounds like a great idea. We should have that. Cool. Okay. Well, then we can, yeah, just jump into things. If no one else has anything, I'll hand it over to Marco and Jeff here.
Okay. I can maybe recap super quickly what I think is in the document, and then people can tell me if they agree or not. And I don't know, maybe we can go on each of these points and see the major comments in there. So I would say that the first thing the document does is try to settle on this on a format, just syntax for what is an extension of an address with a chain ID.
Hey, Marco, sorry to interrupt. Do you mind sharing your
Yeah.
screen so it's more visual for us?
Yeah, sure. A second. There is a bit of a limit to what I can make this large. Is this visible for people?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so basically, sorry, these 3 points mainly I wanted to touch on. So the first is the format. So here in the document, after the motivation, there is this syntactic format. So this is sort of the grammar of what this could look like. So this is the at syntax that is sort of email inspired, where we have here the chain. That is sort of the main problem that we need to look at. That could be an L1, and this would be this is similar to the case that we have today. I have an address, and I just live on a testnet or a mainnet, for example. And then there is the case more interesting where there is a name in there, and then this name, we would like this to be a name of a rollup, and in this case, we would like And this is sort of the tricky thing that maybe is the most complicated part of this document. How do we do the resolution of this name so that we find the right chain ID of this L2? And then if also the user is a name at this point, then how do we solve this username on an L2? So these are sort of the tricks that we try to go through in this document. So basically, just the format. How do we build a registry of chain names for L1 testnets, and especially for L2s, that is kind of the driving case, to replace basically what is now the centralized GitHub list. And then how we do, once we identify the right L2, how do we move the NS resolution? How do we continue it on that L2? Okay, these are kind of the main points. So basically, after the format, the document tries to go step by step on how do we do the resolution. So the simplest case, so the first step is to do the L1 part. So for example, if you take this example, we need to figure out how to resolve the ETH. And in this case, if we assume that there are a few of them, that this is just like ETH, Sepolia, and maybe let's say less than 10 of these well-known L1s that they don't move too much, then this can still be a centralized list like it is today. It's just a small file that lives in a wallet, and that's it. So that's not a big deal. We expect to find in this file, local file, let's say, a mapping between .eth and all the information that I need to resolve the rest. So I go from ETH to I need at least the chain ID really in bytes or in hexadecimal. How to identify, because this is the piece of information that has to go inside the transaction that has to be signed. So this name on itself is useless unless we can get to this. And then in case we want to continue with more resolution, then we can also say point to the right ENS contract that lives on that chain ID. So in this, I mean, if at every step we stop using names, then this is not useful. But I mean, this is kind of the point is that we do want. So we need to keep following these addresses, which brings us to the L2 resolutions. Once we have this, we can go check the rest of the address. So in this case, it was rollup.eth. So we need to resolve rollup. To resolve rollup, we can use the address that we found in the previous step. And then this is going to guide us. So this is a bit of the most complicated part, because we try to build this registry so that there is a unique mapping. We can get into this separately. But then, so this is the resolution. How do I find the chain ID of the rollup? And then once I did that, the last part of the resolution is, okay, now that I know in which rollup I should go, how do I go there, find another ENS address, and then resolve my Alice name? So these are the three steps. And here there is a recap that does the same steps. So we have the first part is we just do it local. So imagine that ELD list is the file that lives in the user phone or like a wallet. So this is still local. Then there is the part where we try to find the rollup chain ID. These are two calls, and this is done on the L1. And then once we have this, we can continue resolving the name on the L2. And at this point, we have all the information that we need, and we can just send the transaction correctly signed to the L2. So this is a bit of a quick overview of the document. So I don't think it's worth getting into more details of each one of the steps. Does this make sense to everybody?
I'm kind of confused. Thanks for that overview. I'm kind of confused on the L1 part. You know, if I have like 0xf, okay, yeah, Sam said the .eth maps to the root chain ID. I see. So there's an off-chain registry of L1 TLDs. Is that right?
Yeah. So I mean, we also discussed a little bit in the channel, in the Telegram group, if this also should be on chain. It's just that it's not a particularly big concern, because like I said, there's supposed to be few of them. And it has the side effect that basically if the only way to know the chain ID of Sepolia is to go to mainnet, then it's sorts of, so I mean, testnets are supposed to be completely separate worlds where you can do your testing. While here you would have a testnet that depends on mainnet. Like you need to first go to mainnet, you can find the chain ID of Sepolia, and then you can go do your testing. And it's a bit weird, and there is no that much reason to do this.
So I have a bit of a concern overloading the .eth. So in ENS names, the .eth actually means like use a particular resolver contract, if I understand correctly. But here, .eth means look up in an off-chain contract for off-chain registry for a chain ID. So they look the same, but they have completely different meanings. And I think that's a concern of mine.
I see. I think you have a perfectly fair point. I don't know if Jeff, do you have any comment on that?
So I feel like right now, I mean, I might not be answering the specific question, but me and Marco have slightly different opinions about this, and I thought it was still worthwhile to just talk to the group about how we kind of how deep we go into this kind of abstraction of the ENS names. So, as an ENS guy and doing ENS for all this time, we don't really have this case where like we very rarely like to have things like, we have like Alice at rollup.eth here, and Alice is not an ENS name. So in this situation, we'd have to change the resolution process. So it actually points to something like alice.rollup.eth, and it goes to that rollup to the L2. Like we don't have this kind of L2 resolution process right now. Right now, everything starts from L1, and we use CCIP read to kind of opaquely go get that data and then verify on L1, and that data can be on an L2, or it can be off chain. And in this situation, it may not necessarily be on, let's say, optimism.eth. The initial alice.eth might actually be on zk-sync or on L1. So I have a concern as well about whether or not we should be creating these nicer looking address, ENS names, if you will, or I guess they're not really ENS names. So yeah, I have. Sorry, go on.
No, maybe I think there's like to. So I would like to talk about what you're mentioning. But I think here the concern is slightly different. Is basically saying. So I think the point is that I would like from the address to be able to start doing my journey of resolution. And I think, so you're right that we're a bit overloading this, but not really, because I mean, today, if I tell you whatever .eth, why are you assuming that this is on mainnet and then you need to go to DNS, to ENS? So this is sort of you have some sort of pre-existing social idea about this. You say, .eth, this sounds like an Ethereum thing. I know that ENS is the place where they register this, and so we're just trying to basically formalize this. We're basically saying if you see .eth, you know that this is something that lives on Ethereum mainnet.
Right, but it's kind of the other direction that I'm worried about, because not all ENS names end in .eth.
I see. So the point is that, again, you need to pick. So this is completely arbitrary. It's just, I don't know, in the Telegram group, people seem to like it. So this could be a new thing. But the point is that there should be one thing that allows you to start your resolution. Because if you have 15, then do you see what I mean?
Yeah, so I think I can probably answer his question a little bit. In terms of like, if it was this way, so like rollup.eth, and we wanted to make sure that we're overloading .eth to mean also start on Ethereum mainnet, then of course we'd have to mandate in this EIP that any L2 rollup that wants to be compliant with the standard would have to use a .eth name and not like a .xyz name. So it would have, if we did overload it, obviously we'd have to mandate that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It seems to me that we should either, if we're going to solve for other L1s, we should either like properly solve for it, or we just shouldn't solve for it at all. And it feels like we're in this awkward middle ground where we're like, use .eth.sepolia in this chain registry. It's highly underspecified.
Right. Again, I think I mean, one way to go through that question is to like start with the question, what feels right for Ethereum testnets? And then depending on the answer to that, like it might just be that whatever we do for testnets, it just feels like an obviously sensible thing to do for other layer ones to just do something isomorphic to that, or potentially it might not. And if it's their first case, then like that's fine and that's their outcome. And then if it's the second case, then like that's their outcome too. And then it's up to them to decide. And like, do they want to do something parallel or do they want to do something different?
For my opinion, I guess, it does seem more natural to have like a dot Sepolia. Otherwise, you'd have to kind of overload, not overload's the wrong word, like add another identifier to be like at ETH, at
Right.
testnet, or at Sepolia or something like that, which it would be like an
Right. Well,
extra.
right. I mean, the other option is like some just basically treating Sepolia as being like an L2 or I guess like so like Gnosis chain or and just expecting it to have some kind of record that's like at the mainnet Sepolia dot ETH ENS.
Actually, it's not the worst idea either, is it?
I think that like Dotsapolia, if like what does that what does that mean? What does Dotsapolia mean? Like anybody can make a chain called Sepolia. So presumably you're referring to some specific registry where it's called Dotsapolia. And then the question is, what is that? What is that registry? And I think that we should take that question seriously if we're actually trying to solve this problem. And
Mhm.
given L1 mainnet, Ethereum probably has the best, decentralization security guarantees. If we want to make an L1 registry, it probably makes sense to put it there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fine. I think I mean, like I have this like small philosophical hang up that like in principle, a test net is supposed to be this kind of parallel universe that you go into where you do things for testing and those things don't touch mainnet. And saying that if you want to resolve an address that represents something on Sepolia, then like you can't avoid touching mainnet. Like that feels a little weird, but if other people here decide that like actually that's fine, then like I'm totally happy to go along with that.
Well, but
Because
just
I
so we
guess
agree
yeah.
on the cost of doing that is that you still need some
Mm.
registry. So you still have
Mhm.
to pick a canonical place for people to fetch those records. And so
Right.
what is that place and what is sort of the uptime guarantees, the decentralization guarantees of that registry?
Yeah, that is fair. I mean, I guess in practice, like in most of the testnet activities, like they're not even going to use like this type of addresses. They'll just they're a much more highly technical thing that just like directly uses 0x addresses without anything else added to them. So yeah, I guess it does feel survivable.
So in terms of size, I don't, so
Hmm.
maybe I'm just trying to avoid solving the problem here. The point is that
Hmm.
what we do is already this having just a file somewhere that somebody put together,
Hmm.
and we trust it because it doesn't move basically at all.
Hmm.
There are a few things. So I'm just basically here, I'm just saying I'm not going to fix that problem. We're just going to continue with that. It's just that when we put L2s in the same system, it starts to feel uneasy because there are many L2s and they move a lot. So we're just trying to fix the new problem and not try to fix the old problem. The new problem.
I'm not sure those are isomorphic. Like dot ETH today means you have, sorry, somebody's echoing my voice. Dot ETH today is an ENS thing. And if you want to resolve it, you go to L1. There's no off-chain thing. You're talking about introducing a dot Sepolia, which doesn't exist today and would rely on a new off-chain thing that's also not required today. So I think you've changed the parameters.
I see. But at the same time, I mean, today, so you're right that this is not the existing thing. At the same time, this is maybe a sort of a formalization of what already informally happens. like if somebody sends me an address without any chain ID and they say, ah, by the way, this is my Sepolia thing, you start to fill on your own the chain IDs and all the other information that. So this is just a way of saying structuring a little bit what already happens informally.
That makes sense. I guess I kind of thought the point of the CIP though was to get very formal about these things that were causing people to lose money and make mistakes.
Yeah. So I think this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to say, let's make things more. Let's make it clear that today, just by looking at the name Sepolia, you're inferring that this is the chain ID. So let's just write this down in a file so that is a bit more more formal than just your happens in your mind. And I'm just saying let's avoid the problem of putting this on chain because it's just a few names and it's easy and we can keep the testing separate. Like if I'm a wallet developer, for example, it's not great that I need to connect to two networks and like I don't know, there are different delays, different. So I don't know, it's a bit. But I don't know, like Vitalik said, I don't have particularly strong feelings about this. I'm happy either way. If people think it's important to put this on the L1, absolutely. Like.
Maybe we can come back to this specific question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know. Let's go to the second part, or I don't want to direct this too much. Like if I'd like to go for like highest concern first.
Yeah, I guess that's a good question. Does anyone have strong feelings here on like what is the if we could only solve for one excuse me, if we could only solve for one thing on this call or make progress on one thing on this call, what is that one or two most important things here? Because there's a handful, and I mean I'm happy just to go through the list of open questions, but if there's something that is obviously highest priority, it's a little bit unclear to me. Otherwise, I can just start going through the list of open questions here.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Right here. Yeah,
so
I guess
think this was we covered this, right?
We did cover that. Yep, exactly. And number two, I think we also covered in the chat.
What was said about number two?
I think that this is incorrect, right? Aren't all didn't I guess unless I'm misunderstanding. Maybe Marco can clarify.
So I think it's so basically saying yeah, so it's basically trying to say, okay, up to now, all the NS resolutions that were in L1, now we're talking about jumping from L1 to L2. This seems like a big change. So I think, so definitely this is kind of like the important thing for rollups, or at least, I mean, I work at Matter Lab, so the important things for us was to make sure that the resolution could jump to L2 as soon as possible, because we didn't want people to register like potentially many chain IDs of L2s and L3s on L1, or maybe the users, they shouldn't have to create names on the L1. So we wanted to move to the L2 as soon as possible. So this is definitely part of the motivation. So regarding how novel and sort of breaking with the existing this is, not at all, because we can talk about this. But so this is what Jeff just mentioned earlier, that there is already a way today. Sorry, this is my note. There is already a way today using ENS and CCIP read to do the exact same thing. So to say, I'm going to do a little bit of resolution on L1, I stop, and I get the instructions on how to continue on the L2. And this is what is already implemented by, I think, Linea. They have a blog post about this. So let's say that we are sort of doing the same thing, maybe in a slightly simpler way, because we don't need gateways, etc. But it's up. I would say it's not something new as a concept.
Right.
Does this make sense?
I mean, I guess like one big this like philosophical snag in all of this, right, is that the path for resolving the ENS of the username and the layer 2 that you're actually, yeah, looking for an address on. Like those two things are separate, right? And so like hypothetically, it would be completely valid to say, yeah, I mean, like you have something like like I have Vitalik.eth and hypothetically, yeah, or even I mean, like you would say, yeah, like I might decide to register like Vitalik.linea.eth, and the procedure for registering that would be on Linea, and all of the logic that actually like maps that ENS name to specific addresses would be on Linea. But then at the same time, like the specific thing that I want might actually be, yeah, like say, yeah, Vitalik.eth at like Polygon.eth, for example, right? And if that happens, then like technically, yeah, like fully, yeah, resolving resolving would not even actually require going into Polygon, right? It would only require going into Linea because that's where the record is. But the address would still be a Polygon address, right? So I guess one question is like, is that also how other people are seeing this? And if, or I guess either if so or if not, like, is there any way in which we're accidentally making that too confusing?
Vitalik, I don't understand why you say that you need to go on Linea to do the resolution
Because like the way that an ENS name works, right, is that there is a procedure for resolving an ENS name. And by default, that procedure only involves being on L1 because ENS lives on L1, right? But with CCIP read, that procedure might involve going on to specific L2s through the CCIP read system. Mhm.
Sorry, the thing that I'm missing a bit is so the use case that I had in mind was very different. Is the thing that everything is a subset. So like, if I go on Linea, is because all my information is there on Linea.
Right.
So it's a bit, but
Right,
I
but
completely understand that there are other use cases. So I would like to understand what is. So why would you put on Linea your information about Polygon?
I
Just to have
think
a use case
because
in mind.
like a user wants to have I think like all of their ENS information in one place, right? Like you want your ENS record to live in one place so that it's easy to edit. And like that's the way that ENS works today, right? Like if we're saying it's going to work differently, then like that's suggesting a change to ENS.
Maybe I'm confused. I sort of thought, ENS today has a way for a name to specify an address per chain,
Correct,
and
it does.
you'd put that record on any chain, and
Correct.
that would continue to work as it does today.
Correct.
And what
Okay,
we're
and
specifying is a new URI that's more
Right.
specific. It can be resolved sort of without the normal ENS lookup of, your specific choice on that particular chain. It sort of has all the information.
Not exactly, right? We want to be able to say like this ENS name on a certain chain so that when you look it up on like in the ENS records, you know which address to get. Like the receiver still gets to specify their address on each chain, but the sender picks the chain that they want to interact on.
Right. But like so in the like status quo, right? Like it is if my ENS record is a subdomain of linea.eth, then even if you want to determine which address to send to me in order to send to me on Polygon, you would have to go onto Linea. I mean, indirectly through the CCIP read mechanism, but you're still going onto Linea, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think let me reframe what I said that you currently, if I say, hey, send it to wilsoncusack.eth and I send you my, I have to tell you additionally, send it to me on Polygon.
Yes.
And I think the problem we're trying to solve is give people, a single URI that expresses their name and where they want to receive it. But they would continue to use the same CCIP and ENS lookup and find wherever I've stored my, my address on Polygon for wilsoncusack.eth. That would all continue to work as expected. or as it does today.
Right. Agree. Yeah.
And so, is there a new problem? I'm not sure if I misunderstood.
I don't. Yeah. I don't think. I don't think there is.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Should we go to question 3?
That sounds good.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with the polymarket use case. Can somebody explain this?
Wait. Before we go to question 3, I just want to clarify. So, like, I think question 2 is talking about what you wrote, Marco, with the kind of like Vitalik at linear.eth. And obviously, this is kind of a completely new resolution process that doesn't go through CCIP read. So, are we agreed as a group whether to go towards this or against this? Because I wasn't quite sure if that was the conclusion.
I was hoping to go back to that point in question 4.
Okay.
We
Okay,
can
that's
anticipate
fine.
question 4 if.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. My bad.
Yeah, I think question 3 is maybe we don't. I think maybe Niran wrote this, or I'm not sure if the person who wrote this is on the call, but yeah, maybe we should hop to 4 if it's proximate. So I'm confused on what you're saying, because my understanding from what we just said is that, you know, we can solve chain for how we express it, the format of how we express it separately. But let's say it's Wilson Cusack .eth at Polygon, you know, or dot Polygon at base.eth. You would still use CCIP reading. All you've given me is a format to express where exactly I want to receive this. Am I misunderstanding something, Jeff?
Yeah, so and you're not misunderstanding at all. It's just that Marco obviously wanted to add something extra to the ENS resolution. I mean, I'm not sure if even call it the ENS resolution process. I would expect it's this own special resolution process for this EIP that would only be implemented maybe by wallets and L2s and clients. That would be something on the lines of having a canonical subdomain registrar like linear.eth or zksync.eth. And then instead of having vitalik.eth at base.eth, it would be something like vitalik at base.eth. And because Vitalik isn't, a fully qualified ENS name, it would just assume that like it lives on base.eth and check base.eth's L2 ENS registry address and then do the resolution process on the L2. And I think Marco wants to do that in a correct, you can add anything, Marco, if I'm getting this wrong, but he wants to do that because it would allow you to do these kind of local reads without having to do the whole back and forth with CCIP read, which would decrease latency. Now, I'm not sure if this. I mean, I think the idea of it makes sense. I'm not sure if it makes sense for the EIP, and I told Marco that, but I thought it makes sense to at least talk to the group about this because obviously a lot of you guys are working for L2s as well. And at ENS, I feel like it's a little bit confusing, but maybe it makes sense. I mean, we have talked about try and cut that round trip a little bit more.
So I think so at the beginning of the document, we were working with this at syntax, and I was trying to make this work. And then while going through the document, Jeff explained to me several times it was a bit hard to get to, but he explained to me really well this ENS and CCIP read. So now I understand a bit better that the two things are very, very close, and I'm a bit undecided actually on which one is the right way to go. So from a point of view of syntax, there is basically very little difference. So this would be sort of user.rollup.eth, and in the other case we were talking about user at rollup.eth. Okay, so in simple cases, this is basically, I mean, it's a very small difference. I'm not sure if there are definitely a couple of problems that we identified while working on the draft that needs to be fixed, which is, for example, on linear for this, for example, the solution that linear used, the rollup here still has the problem that it could be somebody else could register with the same chain ID, so this could be lead to spoofing, etc. So, but these are things that we can fix in the current in the current ENS plus CCIP read. And also what Jeff was mentioning about, so right now in CCIP read uses an external gateway. while one advantage of this of the draft is that you don't need to use an external gateway. You just need to connect. Like if you have two nodes running, like if you're a huge wallet, for example, and you have your own nodes that you trust that are synchronized to several rollups and mainnet, you don't need to go through any gateway. Like you can do all your resolution on your own, and it's probably more trustworthy, less verification needs, etc. So, but this is something that can be just retrofitted into a specific version of CCIP read where you have a specific format in the gateway, and you have a specific way to verify the information that you get from there. So I don't think we are these seems like special cases of a more generic thing rather than a different solution. I'm wondering if there are. So I was trying to sort of show the parts where these things are the same or they could be made the same. I'm not sure if there are other things that are drastically different. Like, for example, somebody was saying, in this syntax, you really have a very sharp distinction from what is the chain part and what is the user part, which goes in this. So here in the format, you have really like everything that is on the left is the address, and everything on the right is the chain ID. So here it's less clear. Is this a huge deal? I don't know. So I don't know. I think one point of discussion where that's not super clear to me is, are these two things doing the same? Can they be made to be the same, or do we want them to actually be very different for?
So, I mean, just as you were talking, I just started to feel that actually this doesn't really, for me, make sense in this spec, just because I feel like this could be a very generic CCIP read extension spec where you have a generic way of being like, okay, this is data on a specific L2, like when that error so the CCIP read throws an error, right? Instead of going to it obviously can give you a gateway, or it can give you a specific chain ID that you can go look it up yourself. And this could work generically, not just for ENS, but for any information and any other protocol that also uses EIP 3668. I think it probably makes more sense in a separate spec. And I know obviously ZK Sync wants to do it like this because it saves round trips, but I think it might make sense as a more generic spec that would help other protocols also using EIP 368.
Jeff, sorry. There's a lot of things that Marco went over, and then I feel like I lost the plot a little bit. So your the point you were just coming down in favor of is a spec that's user.eth at rollup.eth, or I'm confused what you were just endorsing at the end. If I don't know if you can type it in the chat.
I'm not endorsing anything. I don't know about Jeff.
Oh, are you talking about me or talking about Marco?
I was talking about you. I thought we were talking about this. We started talking about we started talking about Linnea. Sorry, can you just specify the performance that you're, or the syntax that you're endorsing as helpful?
Sure. I mean, I was taking it from a more high level position because basically this whole syntactic kind of like debate is related to basically Marco's talking about reducing latency by not going through the CCIP read process. So the CCIP read process, just to recap, is basically this process where a contract will error out with an off-chain error, and then it will give you a gateway. And so you have to go to this gateway, run an HTTP request. The gateway will give you back some information. That information you'll take and then go and do the proof yourself on L1. And so there's this kind of back and forth that you kind of wait from the gateway to do all these things. And so Marco wants a way to essentially do CCIP read, but without having to talk to a gateway. And so right now I feel like we're talking about how to like implement this within this spec, but it could be a very generic spec that allows not just ENS to do this, but anyone using CCIP read, because CCIP read is not a ENS specific spec.
Thanks.
I guess, I mean, one thing there, right, is that, I mean, if we want to think about the longer term future of stuff like CCIP read, right, like it's, like what the thing fundamentally is, right, is it's basically like the fallback light client if you don't have any other kind of client, right? And so if you have some other like way of reading that L2 that's even faster, then in the long run, in principle, you should be able to, right? And I think there's definitely like in aspects to taking to the current scheme where it's like there's something inherently transitionary about it, and like I think like basically there is this longer term roadmap that goes into having a much fuller way to talk about like in this particular case I want to read a particular thing from L2 that'll probably migrate over time like if we figure out sub protocols, then the concept of listing IP addresses what might end up going away and so on and so forth. So it's like I think it's also prudent to basically make sure that stuff that we're doing here and stuff that happens within CCIP and light clients are sort of as independent of each other as possible, and that we're not making assumptions that constrain them.
Maybe one thing that is related, and I just saw it in the document. There is so I was a bit concerned about the degradation of like the verifiability that you have. So today, if I send like I can look at my ledger, I can look at the X of the address, I can check the chain ID, and I sign, and I'm happy. If I need to go through a very complex resolution process, so I mean, right now, what I'm hoping is that the resolution process is like I could do it by hand. Like I do a couple of RPCs, I resolve roll up to a chain ID, I resolve the user to one address, and that's it. I sign, and I'm sort of like if I'm sending $1 million, I can do this by hand and make sure. While if I have a very complex chain of I went to Linea where there is my DNS stuff, and then that sent me to Polygon, that sent me somewhere else, and there is a CIP and a gate. So at that point, like you're really trusting like you really need to trust all like what the wallet is doing basically. So I don't know, like in this case, it's very sharp the difference between the two things. But again, if this could be any name posted anywhere, then again we get into this game of this could. So I don't know. It's just again, I'm not just trying to add more complexity to the question, but I think it's relevant.
Hey, folks, I just want to make sure I'm keeping up with this discussion. So what we're talking about trying to simplify a name resolution. So let's just make an assumption that we go with username at rollup.eth. So the resolution will look like I'm going to go to L1 ENS. I'm going to look up the rollup.eth address, right? And then I'm going to go to that rollup, and I have my local resolution directly on chain because ENS contracts are deployed there. And I don't need gateways, middlemen, nothing, right? In order to do that resolution. The way that I see it, it's a parallel to how DNS works in like the non-Web3 world, right? So is there a major drawback to this, or am I misunderstanding the problem?
Right. So I feel like the at rollup.eth part is pretty well understood, right? The part that's a little bit more tricky is that if you just do user at rollup.eth, then what is the procedure for resolving user?
The user should be resolved on the rollup. If the ENS
okay. Okay,
yeah,
see, so this is different, right? Sorry, because the difference is that user at rollup.eth and user.eth at rollup.eth could potentially mean two different things.
Okay, that's not how I'm thinking about it. User.eth at rollup.eth would have a user.eth registration on that rollup. Like it would be local to the chain.
Right,
So,
see, but okay, right. So this is something that's just like it's different from the way that ENS works today, right? Because the way that ENS works today is user.eth specific like points to a resolving process where that resolving process starts on layer one And potentially through CCIP read or something, it could even go into a bunch of other layer 2s and layer 3s. And based on that, it outputs a mapping from chain to address, right? And that and then you would look in that mapping, and then you would see like which address at rollup or which address is it pointing to at the rollup that rollup.eth points to, right? And like that's a different procedure from saying, okay, first we do rollup.eth, and then in order to resolve the user part, we just immediately start the resolution process inside the rollup.
Understood. So you're talking about backwards compatibility of existing names, like what do we do with them, right? So if somebody
Right.
has
Or I guess I'm just I just want to highlight the fact that like these are two different like these are two different paths.
Yeah, I would just like to highlight as well that, if you start to enshrine something like, let's say it's base.eth, and it's like Vitalik at base.eth, what you're kind of doing right now by saying that I'm going to go to the L2 to resolve Vitalik at base.eth is that you're kind of enshrining base.eth as like the only ENS name on base. But actually, right now, it's possible to have like other names on base. Like for instance, on Optimism right now, there's a subdomain registrar called optinames.eth, and optinames.eth gives out subdomains on Optimism. But Optimism might have their own, optimism.eth and then give out subdomains. And so there is some clash with like, okay, are there any other ENS names on this, L2 now? It's currently possible with ENS, like that we don't have any restrictions to this. So I think there are some other trade-offs as well to kind of enshrining this in this process where this EIP might bias a single subdomain of .eth.
I really think we should avoid creating a new like I'm trying to say what we should avoid without saying we should avoid this whole EIP. We should avoid like trying to resolve some specific problems that ENS solves. Like in my opinion, everything to the left of the at, let's just say, is a string. It's like a black box. It's an address, it's an ENS name, it's a different string format. I don't think this proposal should try to solve that. I think the proposal is trying to describe give users a way to describe intent around where they want to receive funds. And this sort of gets to my question and the thing, number 5. Like, it feels like we started on this path and we discovered nested problems of like, oh, wait, in order to resolve L2s, we need like a trusted registry of L2s. And we have sort of solved that. That could possibly be its own EIP, I think. We now have also said, oh, do we also need a trusted registry of L1s, or is that strictly out of the question? I think we should decide whether that's in scope or out of scope. But yeah, I do wonder if like getting alignment on some of these building blocks and then coming back to the original question would help.
Mm-hmm.
So just to address your question, Jeff, first, I mean, are we not allowing multiple, roll-up names to the same chain ID? So if Optimism has multiple that they want, they can just register those as a separate.
So, I mean, this probably should be discussed in this call as well, or maybe in a later call, but the EIP talks a little about spoofing. And one of the ways we deal with spoofing is having something like like a second mapping of chain ID to name. And I guess you could have multiple names. That's just not how we've done it in the spec. But yeah, currently it would be chain ID to like optimism.eth, and optimism.eth would map to a chain ID. And that's kind of in part of the resolution process would be to like verify this and like make sure that they're pointing at each other to make sure it's not like a spoof. So maybe optimism with OTP MISM isn't like verified, and the wallets and clients that are resolving this will know that it's not mapped from chain ID to OTP instead of OPT. So that's what we have in the spec right now. And yeah, I think having multiple names that go to a single chain ID might get confusing. And at the very least, there'll still be like a centralized arbiter of these like multiple. I don't see like a genuine benefit to having like multiple names to a chain ID, if you know what I mean.
Understood. Okay, and Wilson, my question is, if we limit the scope of the CIP just to chain registry, does that actually solve any problem for us? I just want to make
I'm not. I'm merely pointing out that it could possibly be split into two EIPs, and further saying that the process you described does not match how ENS works today. And I think it would be great to not change how ENS works today. It's a good username resolution system. And so I think we should focus on expressing, I want this thing on this chain at this user identifier. That user identifier could be an address. It could be an ENS name, in which case we leverage the existing ENS resolution process, which uses L1, as Jeff was describing.
Okay, but on its own, I just want to clarify, that actually helps us and solves the problem. Just don't know which problem.
It solves the problem that we currently don't have a way to give a string, for me to give a string to you that tells you where I want funds in a comprehensive way. I think that's what we're trying to solve.
Okay, but you're saying just do it in two separate EIPs, one for name and one for chain?
I'm not saying it has to be two EIPs. I'm sort of just pointing out, it feels like there's like 4 different debates happening at the same time, and it might be helpful to first align on some of the building blocks required here. And it seems like one of the building blocks is we need a trusted registry for L2 IDs and mapping those back. And, finalizing that could be helpful on its own before, moving on to some of these other questions.
Okay.
I mean, I think I can just maybe re-explain what Wilson's saying. I think he's basically saying that jefflau.eth at optimism.eth will jefflau.eth at optimism.eth is an okay way to express it. It doesn't have to be jeff at optimism.eth and change existing standards. So it might be longer, and it might not have this advantage that Marco wants of getting around CCIP read for lower latency, but it still solves the problem. I think that's what he's talking about.
I hear you. I do think it's complex.
So we have 6 minutes left. How do folks want to best use these final 6 minutes? I think, what we've been discussing, what Wilson has flagged, is probably a good next step to make sure that we are separating out the various questions or building blocks to make sure that, we can answer each of them and in which order. So maybe we can do that async after this call. If anyone wants to help out with that, maybe Marco, Jeff, I don't know if you have strong feelings here. We have a smaller group dedicated to ERC drafting. We can take it there. We can take it in the main group, but
and then I guess in terms of just a timeline, like what's a next step are we getting to the point where we would want to actually publish those ERCs and get them talked about in a larger circle? Do we want like another round of this to like actually like realign ourselves on the whole package? Like, what's our feeling?
I would lean towards aligning ourselves a bit more, at least on the building blocks before we, and then maybe either publish by end of next week, if that makes sense.
Yep.
What saying. I
That
think
that makes it. That makes sense. Yeah, I think having an internal timeline for publishing, I think, is good. I mean, I think like this stuff can be staggered, right? I think so. Like we could decide, like for example, that our deliverables for step 1 are just let's say the chain database inside of ENS and the address format that uses the at, and there's like things that this obviously does not quite cover. Like it doesn't, like quite cover, like the really ideal way to handle, like the quote the polymarket use case, like for one example. But that's just something we can keep figuring out over time.
Right.
Can somebody maybe write out what that polymarket use case is so we understand it? And maybe also, since you have strong feelings about how it should go, you can join the working group with us. We value your opinion.
Yeah, happy to be present if I can be helpful. I think Vitalik wrote out the polymarket one in a tweet or something, so maybe somebody can link
Yeah, I just posted the tweet in the chat.
Thank you.
Like, yeah.
I guess in the final 3 minutes, if there's no other questions, one thing that we probably won't answer in the final 3 minutes, but is good for us to frame as one of these main questions is going back to this question that Wilson added, number 8, is making these human readable a mistake? It might be helpful if anyone wants to lay out the bear case quickly for why it could be a mistake.
I think I can lay it. I don't know if Yov is on the call. I think he maybe had some thoughts on this as well. But I think it's interesting, again, given we're reusing like .eth, TLD in a different way, maybe we need to solve that. But it could be helpful to distinguish these from usernames. And so, for example, I think like the left of the @ could be a username, but the rest of it should be sort of machine readable. And maybe it should be more complex to suggest to people they might make a mistake. Yeah, Yov, go ahead.
Yeah, when I was saying it's a mistake, it's not about being human readable, but human writable. So it could be addressed in a different way. My concern was that people think that it's okay to edit it. That okay, so we appended the chain, and now I want to send someone to someone on another chain, so I'll just edit the address manually and change the chain name. So so there's a risk that we'll miss the mark here, and people will still make the same kind of mistakes that they do now. So one way we could solve this, at least for addresses, not for the case where the user is also an ENS name. If it's an address, we could change, for example, the way we calculate the checksum. We could say that the checksum should also include the chain part, so it's human readable. But if you try to modify it, if you try to change the chain name, the wallet will say it's an invalid address because the checksum will no longer be true. So so the concern wasn't about it being readable, but about people trying to modify it manually, which they should never do for an address.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Maybe a quick answer. So I think the fact of using names maybe is helpful in the sense that right now, if I just write address in hexadecimal and chain ID in hexadecimal, I can sign and send and maybe lose my money or something. While right now my wallet has to solve these names. So if the name does not exist because I changed the, I don't know, Coinbase for something else manually, then maybe it's gonna fail, and so there is less of a chance of that problem. Is that so, or is it the same?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand.
I think we're at time. I think it's a good question. I wonder if we should just take it as an action item to discuss further.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Any quick final thoughts in the final 10 seconds here? Otherwise,
nothing for me, but just maybe I didn't understand the question either, so maybe whoever asked it can reiterate in the chat, and I'll think about it too.
sounds great. Thanks everyone for joining. If you want to be in the working group, just drop a message in the main group. All right. Thanks all.
Cheers. Bye.